Hey, what's up, guys? You're listening to the It Takes a Village podcast. I'm Ashley, your host. This is where the struggles are real, the callings are heavy, the kids are sticky. We come together because it takes a village, and this is your tribe. Okay, hey, what's up, guys? I'm here with the Hubs, as you guys know him, Dalton. Hey, babe.
Hey.
So today we are talking about goal setting because it is a new year. So happy new year, you guys. I'm super excited for 2020. And I know you guys have been asking, and I've been talking to you about goal setting individually and then as a couple and as a family, and just kind of what that looks like and how Dalton and I talk about it and how we go through certain questions and kind of navigate what the next year is going to look like for us. And we are just really intentional with this time. Ideally, we make it a big deal, but with a newborn, that wasn't really realistic this year. But like we would go out to dinner and kind of dream and conversate and take time to like really connect and make this a thing. Like it should be a big deal, making plans for your life, for your future, and just connecting. Especially if you haven't had the chance to do that lately, going out for a nice dinner and just dreaming together. But then also having specific questions for each other. So like going to dinner and then maybe it's at dinner you pull out these questions, or maybe it's you have dinner and then you go home and you snuggle in bed and pull out these questions. But really making the time to do this without interruption and just really intentional, and so we have different sections that we want to talk to you about that we go through that have questions. So if you have a pen and paper or notes, I'm also going to create a worksheet for you guys so that you can print it off and use it and use that to navigate. And you guys, honestly, there was a time where I did have these on my phone. I think I didn't have them printed out, but I had them on my phone. So I literally had my phone on the table and we went through these one by one at dinner. So if that's what you need to do, you're going to be able to download the worksheet that I give for you or print it or whatever. But I just want you to know that you're going to have something to guide you through if this becomes a lot and you're driving and you can't write it down. So yeah, we're going to go through these sections and the questions. So get your pen and paper.
So the first section is like your walk and the faith-based part of your life. So in each one of these sections is basically 7 different sections to figure out what those goals look like. But ultimately, if you just apply the question from the book, The One Thing, what's the one thing that you can do in this area that makes all of your other goals easier or not necessary? So if you think about it in that regards, then it makes everything else kind of fall into place and makes it easier to set your priorities.
Yep.
So going into the first section of your own personal faith, what's that one thing that you really want to change going into this year? Whether that is starting to read scriptures daily, whether that's to do a devotional, whether that's to listen to worship music on the way to work. Like, what's the one thing that's going to stir your heart for God in a way that you can integrate that into your regular day? And again, going back to what's the one thing that makes everything else easier? If the thing that stirs your heart the most is scripture versus is listening to worship music, then it's going to make the other one easier. Right? So focus on the one that's going to have the most impact, because then that makes everything else easier.
Or not even easier. I think for me, now that you're saying that, when I was struggling with this section of because I've done this year after year where it's like, yeah, I would like to read the Bible. Like I want to read the whole Bible by the end of the year, or I want to do devotional more. But if you put it into that perspective of like what stirs my heart more, and for me, realistically, as moms, us not having enough time, not being able to wake up any earlier than we already wake up, to do all the things. I think that doing what one thing will stir my heart and draw me closer personally to God in this season and is realistic for the season that I'm in would be listening to worship music, because that is something that makes me feel good. My kids like to sing to it in the car. It starts my day off right, and I can listen to it on the way to work in the car versus trying to get up and reading scripture. So maybe that's also something that you need to think about when goal setting, is not doing something that's idealistic, but also what is realistic for the season that you're in. If you're a mom, if your life is busy, you have little ones. Because I don't know how many times I've written down, read the Bible, and it doesn't happen. And it's because that's not what naturally stirs my affection for the Lord, which doesn't mean that it shouldn't happen, but it also shouldn't mean that I pick the thing that I'm least likely to do, so that way out the gate I fail. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean?
No, absolutely. And then also the question is kind of like you said, like, what is the easiest thing to make sure that it gets done, to knock over that first domino? But then also, a lot of times when we fail to do some of those little things, it's not necessarily because we don't have the time. It's just we forget to do it when we have that time set aside because we get busy doing something else. So even just like setting yourself a reminder or an alert on your phone at the time that you have set aside to do it, and then you have to just stop and take that 5 minutes, because we all have 5 minutes. Everyone spends who knows how many hours just scrolling on your phone, filling the time versus being intentional about it. So just use the technology that you're already on to set the reminder to do the thing that you've made a priority.
Mm-hmm. If you guys need a really good tool for, if that is a goal of yours, devotional reading, if you get the She Reads Truth app, that is really good they give you a devotional that's quick and easy to read, like that's less than 5 minutes, but you do have to pay for it to get it. So I usually just go onto their website during the day, and you can, like Dalton said, if you want to set a timer or a reminder, if I was at home with my kiddos, I would do it during a time that I know is a nap time. Otherwise, like, I think I can do it during a downtime, window that I have at work, that I know I'm just sitting at my desk and that isn't really a busy time. But I hop onto the She Reads Truth website, and for free you can get the whole devotional each day. So each day, you can't read ahead, but you can read one each morning, and that is a good resource to have anyways, if that is one of your goals. The next section, though, are we done with this section? Oh, no.
Yeah. We're done with the personal part of faith. Now we need to talk about what your kids' faith life looks like.
Right. And another thing I want to point out about these is it's important to talk about them out loud so you can hear what your spouse's goals are, and they can hear what your goals are. You can hear their goals, they can hear yours, and that way you guys have an idea of what each other is needing in this season of life, and you can also remind each other.
Yeah.
Because, if you guys know what each other's doing, then you can say, hey, like, don't forget, or, whatever. But I think it's just necessary for you guys to grow together. And the only way you're going to do that is if you know what each other is growing towards and what you're doing in this season of life. So make sure you're saying these out loud, that you're not just like asking the questions out loud and then writing it down quietly. Make sure that this is very conversational. But like Dalton said, the next thing that you want to ask for your family is like, what does this look like for our kids? So that's going to be situational depending on the season that you're in. I know.
And how old your kids are.
Yeah, and how old your kids are. Maybe it's if you have like the Jesus Storybook Bible, maybe it's your reading time at night is going through one section of that, where you read to them out of that book, or it's finding a good church with a Sunday school in it, like a really good Sunday school that is, helps them to thrive in that area or be excited, or, fire them up in their walk with the Lord. For us, like our kids, it's different. We have an older daughter who's almost 10, which is crazy. But for her, I think that really just encouraging her walk with God, and then gratitude, like having her practice gratitude, is one of our goals for her, especially as getting into the tween years. Keeping her perspective right is important.
Well, especially for her, like also the way her mind works, journaling
Yeah.
is incredible for her, and she's really good at it, and she's just a great writer anyway. But our son, is just now learning to read, and him writing for like trying to journal would not be conducive.
Right, and he thrives better around people when he's doing something with us. So that's something that we have decided in this season that we need to continue doing is at night, instead of our reading time being just any book, it's going to be like one section of that book, and then maybe if we have time another book that's for fun. But us reading out loud to him is our goal. So the next section would be your physical.
Specifically for exercise. So like we kind of have physical broken down into two sections for exercise, and then also nutrition, because if you they operate almost in two different silos, like what you're doing in the kitchen, but they also go together.
Yeah.
So
it was just easier to break it up.
Yeah, if you're setting your goals exercise time-wise, then that's going to look different than what you're setting your goals for nutrition, because then you may have to have a little bit extra coordination with your spouse or whatever that looks like,
right.
Whether meal prep or lunch, things like that. So specifically getting into exercise, like what activities make you feel powerful? Mm-hmm. Like what are those things that exercise that you can do that the more you do it, the more you're going to want to do it. Like find that, because exercise is not fun for everybody, but everybody has something that they enjoy more than others, and like make that your starting point.
Yeah, and I think that the goal for this is to choose things that, like we said for the other section, it's things that fire you up, that make it more likely to be able to succeed at these things, to enjoy it, to make it fun. Because ultimately, if your goal is to like lose 25 pounds, but you hate working out, then you're never going to do it, period. But if you love to walk and like listen to music, or, walk with friends around the neighborhood, you might be slower at getting to your goal, but you're more likely to still move your body in some way because you enjoy it more. So I think the important thing is like the thing that you enjoy most, that's going to be most beneficial. Like we said, the one thing. I mean, there's just no other way to explain it. But
or if you're competitive, join like
CG
boot camp contest or Camp Gladiator, or just something where you're going to be around other people, if that's going to help you push harder.
Yeah. And if you guys can't afford a gym membership, like I used to meet with a group of girls in the street in my driveway. Like and that helped us all get together and work out together. It had that sense of community and accountability without the gym membership fee. So just to keep that in mind, that's a good idea. We do that like once a week. So you want to ask yourself, what your exercise goals are, and then have your spouse, your partner ask themselves, like what is their exercise goals. And then we talked about nutrition as a second section, because like Dalton said, based off of what your goals are, that might affect what you guys are doing in the kitchen. And then you have to talk about that, like if you agree or disagree, or, and I think this is really fruitful for conversation, because this is where you can talk about the things that you agree and disagree with, and then come to a compromise or a plan, or how you're going to navigate that together as a family, because you might not be at the point to where,
especially if you're feeding kids and all that and what do you want nutrition to look like as a family too? Like what do you want your kids to eat? How often do you want to eat out? There's some implications in there also with your budget. Like how much do you set aside in your financial budget to be able to afford healthier foods, if that's your goal, whatever that looks like for you and your family. And it's not, I feel like, especially at this time of year, when you're talking about New Year's, people try to go from
balls to the wall.
0 to 100, and go from eating fast food all the time to I'm going to do
keto diet,
Whole 30, or keto. Like it doesn't necessarily have to look like that. It's like, what's the one thing you can do, going back to that question? And maybe that's saying, we're only going to eat out once a week,
Mm-hmm.
or we're only going to eat out for date night.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you take the kids out, it's going to be more expensive, for one. Two, you know, that's not always the healthiest places that you're going if you're taking your kids out to eat. And so, what parameters or barriers, self-imposed, that you can put into place that's going to help you get further down the line?
And this helps you guys to be united on the chicken nugget front. Like, if you are planning on your kids trying new foods this year, or maybe it's you are changing things up in the kitchen to where you want to be healthier, well, then you need to be on a united front to the kids and agreement together that, hey, when mom or dad, whoever sets the table and puts the food down, that you guys are both in agreement. And when the kids, you know, ew, that's gross, I don't want to eat that, you're both responding the same way. Or if you know, mamas want to eat healthier for yourselves, then this is the time to have a conversation with your husbands to say, this is a goal of mine. I need you to support me in this. And then however that needs to work out for us, what I make, everybody eats. I'm not the mom that is making 5 different meals for 5 different people, because that is not sustainable for me. That's not healthy for me. That's stressful. It sounds stressful. So for me, that's just my personal preference, and that's how we navigate. And we as a family, as a couple, have decided that's how it is. And Dalton stands by me on that. When, you know,
Yep.
And our kids know it. Like, there's no conversation about it, because that's just how it is in our house. So, but if you're a family who's listening and you need to make that change, then you guys need to be in agreement about how you're going to move forward, because there is going to be pushback. Because with change comes hesitancy and, you know, stuff like that, especially if your kids aren't used to eating healthy, everything's gross. And initially in our house, we have the rule of you have to try it 2 times before you can say you don't like it. And then I will leave you alone about it. Most of the time,
They try it and then like it.
Yeah, they try it and then they like it. And if they don't, then that's fine, and you don't make a big deal about it, and you could still serve it. I think anyways.
But then you also don't go back and make them new food.
Right, you don't make them new food, because that is habit creating, and then they immediately can say, oh, I tried it 2 times, mom's going to make me something else. Like, they don't even have an effort to like it. But that's a totally different conversation. What I just wanted to encourage you guys is that if you are making nutritional changes for your family, that you are in agreement and you do have a conversation of compromise and what's important to you, and work that out between you and your husband, and that you are in agreement, so that way when dinner time does roll around, you're not having conflict at the dinner table, you're not arguing about what's okay, what's not, you're not having a power struggle in front of the kids about it, and nobody's, you know, like, you're not sticking your ground on people finishing their meal and then your husband's like, you know, just give them chicken nuggets or whatever. So have these conversations, and that's why I said it's important to talk about these out loud.
Worst case scenario, if they go to bed one night without having dinner, they're going to be fine.
They're going to be fine.
They'll survive. And then they'll learn next time.
Mom ain't playing. Yeah, mom ain't playing. So then we also talked about confidence, which I don't know if that's a section, but I have it in my notes.
Well, it's under the physical.
Okay. So did we get to that yet?
We haven't talked about that specifically.
Oh, okay.
But those are questions that you can ask yourself of, do I feel attractive to my spouse? What can I do to be more attractive to my spouse? Are there athletic goals that you want to achieve, whether that be running a mile or running a marathon, depending on where your starting point is? Yeah. Like, all these different...
Maybe it's like rollerblading together as a couple, or whatever that looks like for you guys. For me, this one stuck out a bunch because as moms, I think we tend to struggle in the confidence arena naturally after having kids and all that. And so for the most part, that tends to be something that I really want to focus on in the new year. So I think it's interesting to ask your spouse, like what about me makes you attracted to you or whatever, and just getting kind of their perspective on you and how they can also encourage you if you do struggle with self-confidence or feeling sexy or feeling attractive. Like maybe it's your husband's way of making you feel attractive is by grabbing your you're already smiling, grabbing your butt, or like telling you, and maybe that's not how you perceive, like maybe that's not what confirms you in you that you're attractive. I don't have the right words for that, but affirms, yeah. Maybe you need him to tell you in other ways that you're attractive, or maybe it's that you need him to notice an outfit, or you need him to touch you more, hug you more, whatever it is. I think that's a good conversation to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just getting on the same page, because we all have something we'll talk about in a little bit here is love languages, and that's going to affect how you hear your spouse and how you interpret their actions. So moving on from the physical arena and moving on to individual growth, and then also individual care and treatment. Are there any new skills that you want to learn? Do you want to do more reading? Do you want to learn the piano? Do you want to learn guitar? Any kind of hobby that you want to try to...
Do you want to have a book club with your friends? Do you want to just make meeting up with your friends more this year, like once a month? Do you want to take time to journal? Like, it doesn't have to be this big elaborate thing. Just, what do you need? Like the way that I look into it, especially, I mentioned this in the last episode about picking your word for the year. I think that was it, was like looking at last year and asking yourself, what was there less of that you need more of this year? So if you felt isolated, if you felt like you didn't have any friends, you were struggling with people to talk to, then maybe you need to this year focus on, for your self-care or personal growth. Maybe it's that you need to step outside of your comfort zone and invite people over, or invite somebody to your home, or meet up for lunch.
Yeah, and so the question of your personal growth, of what is an area that you specifically want to grow in, or again, develop some new type of skill. And then the personal care / treatment is like, what can you do that's just going to allow you to decompress, de-stress? I know for me, like, that is getting a massage. Like, it's being able to go and just take a time out for an hour, and it's something I typically only do a couple times a year, but like trying to make that a priority in this coming year and doing it once a month. And because of how much that just mentally unplugging, and then also physically getting knots and stuff rubbed out of my back, because it's just one of those areas for me that gets really, really tight, like makes me feel so much better afterwards.
So maybe what you need to ask yourself in this area is, what can I do for myself that will make me be at my best self? Because we all know, like, some of us, we need to have time alone, to recoup or re-energize ourselves. Like, being around people is really draining, and you feel like, especially when you have a lot of kids, you feel like you're being pulled at all directions. So you need time to reboot, whatever. And so maybe self-personal time with nobody touching you, nobody drooling on you, is important to you, whether it's like 5 minutes or 10 minutes. But yeah, I think for myself, it's having a morning routine that gives me time to myself when everybody's sleeping. That's important to me, and I think that's something that I'm going to really try to stick to this year. But that also means that I also need to set myself up for success by getting ready the night before. Like if I'm going to read something, having it ready in the morning. If I'm going to work out, having what I'm going to do already in my mind or picked out. That way I'm not getting up and spending the whole time in the morning trying to fumble through my books or fumble through, YouTube videos and what have you. So, like I said, I'm going to give you guys a worksheet on what these are and the questions so that you can go through them. But we just kind of wanted to talk you through it. Is there anything else that we're missing?
The most important one.
Oh, what are we going to see?
Marriage.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, we have one last section.
So the last section being marriage. I think the number one question that you want to start with is just, is your marriage heading in the right direction? Like, do you both feel that way? And then if it is not, then you have to kind of just pause right there and just say, well, why do you feel like it's not heading in the right direction? Mm-hmm. What can I do to help change that, right? Like, marriage is it's not even really a give and take, it's a give and give. Like, both people have to be giving. In some seasons, that's a 50-50 split, and then there's other seasons where that's a 70-30, and then some seasons where it's a 10-90. Like, it's both people have to be coming to it with a open hand, saying, what can I do to help you feel closer to me? What can I do to help you feel like we're moving in the right direction? And so I mentioned love languages earlier. That's one thing that helped us really early in our relationship. And I encourage you, if you're not familiar with this or you haven't done the quiz to find out what your love language is, or if it's been a while, because sometimes love languages change, Google that, pull it up, or I think it's just at 5lovelanguages.com.
Yeah.
And find out, is it physical touch? Is it words of affirmation? Is it quality time? Is it gifts? Whatever your love language is, and you need to know what your spouse's is, because if you're communicating your love and trying to fill their tank in a way that they don't receive love, then that tends to make everything kind of disjointed.
Yeah.
So, are we meeting each other's physical needs? Are we meeting each other's emotional needs? What can we do over the next year to create that consistency?
Yeah, I think one of the good questions is just straight up asking your spouse, what do you need from me right now? Like, what do you need from me in this season of life? Because I believe very much so that our relationships and our life in general is seasonal. Nothing stays the same. Like, you'll go through a period where all of your kids are 9, 10, 11, but then when they're 12, 13, and 14, that's a whole nother season. That life looks like a whole lot different, whether it be activities are different, your kids are needing you in different ways, and so your needs are different from your spouse. So everything is constantly changing, and I think it's for you just to straight up ask your spouse, not even just now, but throughout the year, what do you need from me? And an open-ended, like, no judgment, no, like, and for me, it's like, right now with a baby and 2 other kids, and I'm working and he's working, and I want to really give my all to the podcast and do a bunch of things. It's like, I just need you to know that when I say I need help, I need your help. Like, so that is what it looks like for us. But I think just being able to ask for, your spouse, what do you need from me? And him ask you, what does he need from you, is very important.
And also, is your spouse your first person, right? Like, are they the first person you run to when you're having some type of internal struggle, some type of just a great day at work, or a bad day at work, or just when something's on your heart? Like, are they the first person you're running to and confiding in? Because if there's somebody else in your life that you're going to with all of these things before ever coming to your spouse, then that's going to open up that door to uh, drive a wedge a little bit at a time between you and your spouse.
Yeah, because if you're confiding or relying on somebody else, female or male, that is energy and situations that you're taking away from your spouse that they can be helping you and doing life with you. So that's really important that they are your go-to. And if they're not, maybe this is a good indication as you're listening and you're thinking, oh, that's me, then maybe you need to redirect who you're leaning on and who you're relying on in this season or in this next year of life. I think the other questions, which like I said, I'm going to include these in the worksheet so you guys can choose what you need to talk about. But like, how can we more clearly communicate with each other? How can we make more time for romance? Like these are not easy questions, but I feel like they are needed. And then what can we do to improve our sex life? What else?
Those are like, that's, if you're asking, there's no perfect question to ask. It's just like having this conversation with your spouse. And again, I think what you said earlier, as far as one of the biggest ones, just like, what do you need from me in this season? Mm-hmm. Because there are some seasons of life where you don't have any kids and time for romance is never an issue. And then you do start to have kids, and then that's something that if you're not intentional about can get put on the back burner, or you don't go on date nights or whatever the case may be. I know for us, like something that was, monumental a few years ago, now I think it's probably 5 years ago, was just starting to do, have a pre-scheduled date night once a week to where it was already on our calendar. And then there's been seasons of life since then where, that instead of once a week goes to once every other week.
Right.
But before that, it was just like, whenever we...
Right, but here's what I want to say about that is that also we were aware when we had this conversation of what do we need for each other, and we felt like there was a disconnect, and we did need to reconnect. So initially, it was really important that we made it a priority to put our marriage first for the next year and really do date nights weekly. But then once we gained that connection back and we, became more one with each other and on the same level or whatever you want to call it, then we could back off a little bit. Like our marriage was thriving. And of course, once your marriage is thriving, you don't just want to like drop off because...
Yeah, you have to keep it regular.
Right.
And keep it scheduled so that it's doesn't just fall off.
Right. It doesn't become less important because, it got good. Because then, just like when you work out, you don't stop working out once you get a six-pack because then obviously you lose your six-pack. So you keep going, but it may just look like less. And it's okay that life gets in the way sometimes and you have to go an extra week without a date night, but just know that it doesn't become a habit of, let's just skip the next one and then the next one. Like, just make it a priority, especially if that is one of your goals for this year. So we're going to give you guys some conversation starters or some questions in that area that you can go through. But I think really our goal with this is just to make sure that you're always on the same page, like we're always on the same page with each other. And also, I think the benefit of doing this is this opens a space for you guys to have this conversation continuously throughout the year, that it's not just at the beginning of the year, every year, you decide to talk to each other about the important things, that you're always continuously having a conversation. I know when we first started this, Dalton and I went through this worksheet, question by question, and we didn't anticipate each other's answers because we didn't really know them. And whereas to this year, we kind of just were reaffirming what we already knew or checking in with each other to make sure we were on the same page, to make sure we were both heading in the same direction, because that's important, and that our goals were the same, and kind of just our overall idea for this next year was on the same page. But if you're not there, everybody has to start somewhere, and it's better to start anywhere than to not start at all, especially when it comes to building on your marriage. And I think that that's what this really does for each other, is helps you guys to help invest in each other and invest in yourselves as a couple. So that was our goal for this episode, was to just really kind of guide you guys in our thought process on how we go through goal setting through the year. So I hope that was helpful. Do you have any other last tips or words?
I think just going into it and giving your spouse the space and inviting them to just be completely honest,
right?
Even if,
and not taking things personal.
Yeah, and just go into it with the expectation of, hey, they may say something that caught me off guard, or maybe I didn't like to hear, but don't pay so much attention to that and pay more attention to how can I serve my spouse.
Yeah.
And I think as long as you approach this question like, how can I serve my spouse? How can I support them? How can we each help each other accomplish their goals, both individual goals and family goals, then I think that this conversation is always super helpful every year when we do it.
Hey guys, hope you enjoyed that episode. Don't forget to share it with a friend. Also, I mentioned the goal setting workbook that I was creating to go along with this episode that has all the questions that you guys can ask each other to create this conversation about goal setting for the new year. So make sure you go to theashcarroll.com, and at the top tab, you'll see Couples Goal Setting Workbook, and you can download it there and begin to grow together and set goals for the new year. I hope you guys found this episode helpful. I hope you guys have great conversation because of this episode. And as always, if you need a topic covered, shoot me a DM, a message, anywhere that I am. And I hope you have an awesome rest of your week.